My name is Rosie Goldsmith and welcome to my Riveting interview series, conversations with authors from all over the world. My nickname is Rosie the Riveter, and one of my great passions is introducing readers to riveting writers. You may already know The Riveter, our magazine of international writing, as well as our online riveting reviews and riveting reads. They're all dedicated to giving foreign writers in English translation the prominence they deserve, which is exactly what I want to do with this series of riveting audio and video interviews. They're all free via our website, eurolitnetwork.com. Welcome to today's riveting author.
Durs Grünbein is, for me, one of the world's greatest poets. Now, he's sitting next to me, and I hope that's not embarrassing him, but he is one of the most important poets of my life, my personal life, my German life. And I became aware of him when the Berlin Wall fell in 1989, so 30 years ago. And I don't think my German professors at university would ever believe the fact that one day I'd be sitting here interviewing Durs Grünbein. But welcome, Durs, and we're here in a very interesting building. This is a building that belongs to the German embassy now in London, where we're doing the interview. And it used to belong to the East Germans before the wall fell. Now, you were born in East Germany and in Dresden. How does it feel for you to be in this building?
Yeah, it's rather shocking. I could not imagine that the two embassies were so close to each other, right in a kind of confrontation. So
the west is just across the road.
Yes, just across the road here on Belgrave Square. Well, actually, I should not be here in this building. That's to start with that. It's not a good feeling to be here. So,
well, we'll keep the interview short. So, Durs, where were you? What were you doing when the Berlin Wall fell? You were on the other side, on the east side of the wall. What were you doing? How old were you?
Well, I was 27 at that time, and actually more important than the falling of the wall were the weeks before. So it all started at the beginning of October in different cities. I was in Berlin at that time, and I was from the very first moment on, I was part of these demonstrations, right, from the 4th of October on, when Mr. Gorbachev was visiting the GDR, and they were celebrating the last birthday of this other republic. And during the next days, it was sometimes very dangerous, and we even got imprisoned.
Were you in prison?
Yes, for one night. And but by the beginning of November, it was quite clear that things were changing very fast. So, but still, it was a surprise for us all. This one night when one of the members of the Politburo made this, I would say, historical mistake to misinterpret a note on his.
It was Günter Schabowski.
That was Günter Schabowski, and we have seen it all in the TV. And the same night we decided, let's go on the street. Let's have a look if they really do open this border tonight, and they did.
It was a shock. I mean, I was there. It was a complete shock. It was chaos.
Yeah.
So it happened, and how long did it take you to get used to the fact that you were free?
I mean, at that night I realized that was it. That was the end of the GDR. There was no chance to keep these two societies from that moment on when you had opened the wall. Because actually, I would say this Berlin Wall was not only the identity of the system, it was the only reason to be. If you take up the wall, so there is no chance to keep this other model of German society. It had no chance. So the next step was reunification, of course. It also came very quickly, but it was just a matter of time.
This was a country that had existed for only 40 years, the GDR, and it disappeared So the country you were born in disappeared. How have you worked through this material, if you like, in your life, but also in your work?
Well, a political system disappeared, but not German culture. And you were so kind to introduce me as maybe a poet who has a bigger horizon or so. For me, the idea, Goethe's idea of world literature was very alive when I grew up. So I had a longing for not only for the Western civilization, but for all parts of the world to be there as well. And that was the reason at the late 80s, I applied for an immigration visa, just firstly for cultural reasons.
To leave the East.
Yeah, and I didn't look for this last political encounter. So I always said, when we, with our friends, we were artists, so when we went to the streets for the demonstrations, for us it was more kind of an artistic performance to show that we are relaxed and that we have another idea of freedom. Not so much only a political one, an artistic one, let's say.
You were writing from a very young age, and your first collection of poetry was published in 1988, so that's 1 year before the wall fell. And that was published, you wrote it in the East and it was published in the West. Yes. And you've continued to publish these major collections of poetry. I mean, 15 collections and books of essays and memoirs, and you work in a multimedia world now. Would you say it's the poetry still that defines you and the experience you went through?
Yes, very much so. Poetry is the center for me. It's my form of existence. I could only define myself and what I observe in the world line by line in poetry. So poetry is if you take an example from biology, this is we are getting to the cells of writing, right? And all other forms I could only try because I have this opportunity to think in verses, in lines. So from then I can go to longer prose pieces. I could, if I want, maybe even write a novel, and of course essays and libretti and dramas. So, but the basis is always this line.
Would it be fair if I describe you as a poet who writes autobiographically, but always with regard to the greater historical context? Yeah,
I find like features of my autobiography in very far ages. So I am in dialogue with the classic antique and with the Renaissance times, with some Baroque philosopher like Descartes. I wrote a big book. So, and I always find bits of my identity there already. That's the idea of having this dialogue among ages.
So you are now talking a lot to ancient Rome and to ancient Greece. And what are you discovering there? What relevance are you discovering there for your life?
For instance, when I let's say talked to Juvenal, I realized that he was one of the first urban poets. So his description of old Rome, a very precise one, we could use now for making films and so on. The historians are very thankful, for instance, for this piece of old Roman literature. But we already have this kind of a writer who has an awareness of metropolitan life. So for me, it's a kind of a tool to get into another age and to see what was very similar to our times already.
When the Berlin Wall fell, you said something really wonderful in public, and I wrote down the quote because I thought it was great. You started traveling the world, and you described this as a phase of almost hysterical travel in the interest of making up for lost time. Do you still feel you're making up for lost time?
Yeah. You know, of course, this Proustian thought, looking for the...
À la recherche, always à la recherche.
And I'm really on a research of lost times. Well, I have the feeling that, in a way, the first 20 years of my life, I mean, it was a good time in a way, and in a book, I tried to go back to this childhood and youth there, and it was all okay in a way, but on a wider scale, it was a kind of a lost time.
So when you travel now all over the world, and you live in Rome and in Germany as well. So where do you feel at home now?
In Rome, for instance, I could easily work. Sometimes I need to be abroad amidst another culture, different language, and so to concentrate more on my behalf. So that's the reason why I like to be sometimes in Rome. So I sit there on my kitchen table and and could plunge into my own manuscripts and work very free. So otherwise, if you are in your own culture, living in Berlin means for me, so every day, hundreds of phone calls and appointments and so on. One of the reasons to be abroad is to hide yourself in a way.
You're a very widely published poet and public figure. Do you feel the pressure of that? Is it hard in Germany to be so visible all the time?
I consider myself rather as a European poet, so I do it for the idea of a better Europe. So, and for this, I would take much obligations and doing interviews, writing articles for that purpose. So, and I do not feel stressed about that.
What would you describe as the situation for poets in Germany today? Is it a good time?
Yeah, it's actually a good time. So we have so many schools in a way. We have so many different experiments, new voices. It's actually a rich culture of poetry. But sometimes it's that probably that there are more people writing poetry than reading. It could be, it's a paradox. When I meet people after readings, they tell me first that they themselves were writing poetry. So
Durs, we've been very lucky that a lot of your poetry has been translated into English by many of our greatest translators, Michael Hoffman, Anthea Bell, Karen Leader, and several others. We've got several anthologies in English, From Ashes to Breakfast, and I know that there's a new one coming out soon. It's called From a Book of Weaknesses, and you're going to read one of the poems from that.
Vom Erlernen alter Vokabeln. Die Wörter schlafen nicht in den Wörterbüchern. Sie ziehen den Block ziellos, spielen mit Munition. Wie Kinder, die Krieg in sich tragen, lang nach dem Krieg. So hatten wir nicht gewettet, Herr Nobel, dass Dynamit alles austauschbar macht in Materie, Moral, Malerei. Partikel, die seither wild durcheinanderwirbeln, Artikel in allen Fachzeitschriften, für jedes Fach Abertausende. Eine Wüstenpiste des Wissens. Und die riesigen Löcher zwischen der und jener Bedeutung von Devotion, die Satellitenbilder von Delirium oder Demokratie. Wer war schuld? Wer verdarb alles? Dies Milchgesicht, das den Smog inhalierte und ausblies als Goldstaubdunst. Er war schuld, als er die Morgenröte zum Trödler trug. Diktiert ihr ruhig weiter, Dichter. Die Worte schlafen nicht.
Thank you. Vielen Dank, Herr Grünbein. Thank you so much. And thank you for coming to London.